Captain Li Huan pressed his hands against the cold metal railing of his ship's bridge, staring out at what used to be home for 50,000 people. The colony ship New Geneva was nothing but scattered pieces of metal and plastic now floating in the darkness of space like broken toys. Somewhere in that mess of debris were the bodies of his sister Ji Young and her 2 kids. He had promised to visit them next month for little Su Jin's birthday. The Zephyrians had called it a cultural integration enforcement action in their official report. Li Huan called it murder. The alien warships had appeared without warning, demanded immediate surrender, and when the civilian transport tried to run, they had blown it apart with military-grade plasma cannons. No mercy for the children screaming in the corridors, no second chances for families just trying to find a new life among the stars. Li Huan had been a ship captain for 20 years, ferrying diplomats and peacekeepers between worlds. He had seen plenty of alien cruelty before, but always in small doses. A beaten refugee here, a destroyed settlement there. Nothing like this. Nothing that wiped out an entire community in less than an hour. His hands shook as he reached for the communication panel. On the other side of the galaxy, Ambassador Park Min sat in the grand chambers of the Galactic Consortium, surrounded by beings who looked like they had crawled out of humanity's strangest nightmares. The Velkari delegate resembled a giant spider made of silver metal, clicking and whirring as it spoke. The Thraken representative looked like a walking tree with too many eyes, and the prime speaker was something like a living crystal that sang its words instead of speaking them. They were discussing the New Geneva incident like it was a minor paperwork problem. Park Min had spent 6 hours explaining what happened, showing footage of the destroyed ship, reading the names of the dead children. The aliens listened with the same attention they might give to a weather report. Perhaps a formal letter expressing concern, suggested the Velkari delegate, its mechanical voice buzzing with disinterest. Something strongly worded but not too aggressive. We wouldn't want to escalate tensions over such a small matter. The Thraken delegate rustled its branch-like arms. A trade embargo might be appropriate. Nothing too harsh, perhaps 30 days. That should send the proper message about excessive force against protected species. Park Min wanted to scream. 50,000 people were dead, and these creatures were worried about trade relationships. He had been humanity's voice in these chambers for 8 years, always calm, always diplomatic, always finding the peaceful solution. But there was no peaceful solution to genocide. The Prime Speaker's crystalline body chimed with what passed for laughter among its kind. Humans are far too emotional for proper warfare, it sang in those bell-like tones. They cry over individual deaths and cannot see the larger strategic picture. This is why we must handle these delicate matters. Evolution has given us clearer thinking. Park Min bit his tongue hard enough to taste blood. These evolved beings had never held a crying child or buried a friend. They had never known love or loss in any way humans would recognize. To them, the destruction of New Geneva was just numbers on a report, acceptable losses in some greater game they were playing. 3 sectors away, Dr. Kim Sora knelt beside a small hospital bed in the refugee camp on Kepler Station. The little girl couldn't be more than 7 years old, with dark hair matted with dried tears and eyes that had seen too much. She was one of the lucky ones who had escaped the Zephyrian raids on the outer colonies, but luck was a relative term when your parents were dead and your home was ash. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Kim Sora asked gently, running her medical scanner over the child to check for injuries. The girl whispered something too quiet to hear. Kim Sora leaned closer. "Bora," the child said. "My name is Bora. Are the bad aliens coming here too?" Kim Sora pulled a thermal blanket up to the girl's chin and forced a smile. "No, sweetie. You're safe here. I promise." But it was a lie, and they both knew it. The consortium had classified little Bora as a minor displacement case, just another statistic in their files. If the Zephyrians decided to hit this station next, the aliens would debate for weeks about the proper response while more children died. Kim Sora had been a doctor for 15 years, healing beings from dozens of different worlds. She had sewn up Thraken bark skin and treated Velkari system failures, and even helped crystalline beings like the Prime Speaker when their structures cracked. She had always believed that helping others was the highest calling. But what good was healing when the galaxy kept creating more wounds? Around her, hundreds of other medical staff worked to treat the refugees streaming in from the frontier, all of them human, all of them watching their patients suffer while alien governments played politics with human lives. They were tired of being the galaxy's conscience while getting no voice in its decisions. That night, Captain Li Huan sat alone in his quarters and composed a message that would change everything. His fingers hesitated over the keyboard for a long moment. Once he sent this, there would be no going back. The galaxy would learn what happened when you pushed humanity too far. "The children are gone," he typed. "It's time." The message traveled through space faster than light, bouncing between relay stations and quantum transmitters until it reached Earth in less than 6 hours. In a bunker buried deep beneath the mountains outside Seoul, Admiral Choi Jun read those 5 words and felt something cold settle in his chest. The war room around him hummed with quiet activity. Hundreds of screens showed human positions throughout the galaxy, information gathered by 3 centuries of quiet observation. Every human diplomat, every doctor, every peacekeeper, every aid worker had been reporting back to Earth for generations. Not as spies exactly, but as watchful guardians keeping track of threats to humanity. The alien races thought humans were weak because they chose peace. They had no idea that choosing peace required knowing exactly how to wage war. For 300 years, humanity had studied every alien species, learned their technologies, mapped their weaknesses, and prepared for the day when diplomacy would no longer be enough. Admiral Choi Jun looked at the faces of his staff, men and women, who had spent their lives planning for this moment while hoping it would never come. The time for hoping was over. "Initiate protocol silence," he said quietly. Across the galaxy, every human received the same coded message within hours. The healers, the peacekeepers, the diplomats, the aid workers. All of them had been waiting for this signal their entire lives. The galaxy was about to learn that the most dangerous enemy was the one who had been studying you while pretending to be your friend. The morning session of the Galactic Consortium began like any other, with delegates shuffling into their assigned seats and preparing for another day of endless debates. But something was different. Ambassador Park Min's chair sat completely empty for the first time in 8 years. No aide, no replacement, no message explaining his absence. Just an empty seat where humanity's voice used to be. The Velkari delegate clicked its metallic limbs nervously. Perhaps the human representative is simply running late. They are known for their punctuality, after all. But Park Min never showed up. Neither did any other human diplomat anywhere in the galaxy. Every embassy, every consulate, every diplomatic mission had been quietly abandoned overnight. No dramatic speeches, no angry declarations of war, no demands for justice. The humans had simply packed up their things and disappeared like morning mist. On the trading station at Alpha Centauri, the docking master stared at his empty berths with growing confusion. The human cargo ships that had arrived like clockwork, every week for decades, had simply stopped coming. No warning, no explanation, no alternative shipping arrangements. The medical supplies, food shipments, and manufactured goods that dozens of worlds depended on were suddenly nowhere to be found. Same thing was happening everywhere. On Kepler Station, the human medical teams had vanished from the refugee camps, leaving behind only their equipment and standard resignation letters that said nothing more than "service terminated, effective immediately." The alien patients they had been treating woke up to find empty corridors where bustling medical centers had been just hours before. Commander Im Tai sat in a hidden command center that officially didn't exist, watching reports flood in from every corner of the galaxy. The evacuation was proceeding exactly as planned. 3 centuries of careful preparation were finally paying off. Every human colony, every outpost, every settlement was emptying with military precision that would have impressed the galaxy's greatest tacticians if they had been paying attention. But the aliens weren't paying attention. They still thought of humans as the galaxy's helpful servants, not as a coordinated civilization capable of complex military operations. The massive transport fleets that appeared to collect human populations were dismissed as emergency relief efforts. The fact that these refugees were loading advanced equipment and classified materials onto their ships went completely unnoticed. In the Andromeda spiral arm, construction drones worked 24 hours a day building structures that defied easy explanation. Massive installations rose from dead worlds and empty asteroid fields, their purposes known only to the humans who designed them. Supply ships arrived daily, carrying materials and personnel to these secret projects. The galaxy's sensors detected the activity, but classified it as typical human infrastructure development. The aliens had always seen human construction projects as peaceful endeavors. Schools, hospitals, research stations, communication arrays. They never imagined that humanity might be building something designed for war. The construction crews worked with quiet efficiency, knowing that every beam they welded and every circuit they connected brought them closer to the moment when the galaxy would finally understand what humanity was truly capable of. On Nexus Prime, the consortium chambers erupted into chaos as news of the human withdrawal spread. Conflicts that had been peacefully managed for decades suddenly exploded into violence. The Rigel system, where humans had maintained a delicate ceasefire between two warring species for 30 years, descended into open warfare within hours of the Peacekeepers' departure. Trade disputes that human arbitrators had kept under control for generations suddenly escalated into economic warfare. Shipping lanes that had been neutral territory under human oversight became battlegrounds as different species fought for control. The careful balance that humanity had maintained across hundreds of worlds collapsed like a house of cards. The crystalline Prime speaker's harmonic voice cracked with stress as it tried to maintain order. Where are our human mediators? We need them to resolve these conflicts immediately. But there were no human mediators to call. The beings who had spent their lives preventing wars had simply vanished, leaving behind a galaxy that had forgotten how to solve its own problems without them. The aliens had become so dependent on human wisdom and compassion that they couldn't function without it. Zephyrian war leader Vex Thul studied the reports of human withdrawal with predatory satisfaction. His species had built their empire through conquest and intimidation, and they saw humanity's retreat as a sign of weakness. The destruction of the colony ship New Geneva had apparently broken human morale completely. "The soft skins run back to their homeworld like frightened children," he announced to his fleet commanders, his scarred features twisted into what passed for a smile among his kind. "They cannot stomach real warfare. This is our chance to finish what we started and claim their territory for the Empire." His subordinates chittered their agreement. Humans had always been too weak for proper military action, preferring to talk and negotiate instead of fighting for what they wanted. The Zephyrians had never understood why the other species tolerated such weakness. Now, with humanity cowering in their home system, it was time to teach the galaxy what real strength looked like. What Vex Thul didn't know was that human intelligence had been monitoring Zephyrian communications for over a century. Every battle plan, every strategic discussion, every weakness in their military doctrine had been carefully catalogued and analyzed. The humans weren't retreating in fear. They were positioning themselves for something far more devastating than anything the Zephyrians could imagine. In a medical facility that existed in the empty space between star systems, Dr. Kim Sora worked with desperate efficiency to help her fellow refugees process the trauma of what they had witnessed. The survivors of the frontier raids needed more than physical healing. They needed to understand that their suffering had not been meaningless, that justice was coming for those who had caused it. Around her, the facility hummed with activity that would have shocked the galaxy's medical establishment. The hospital, ships that had once carried healing to alien worlds, were being systematically converted into something far more dangerous. Medical scanners became targeting systems. Surgical equipment was repurposed for military applications. The same hands that had saved alien lives were now learning to take them with surgical precision. "I never thought I'd see the day when we'd turn our healing tools into weapons," whispered Dr. Han Youngjia, a colleague who had spent 40 years treating patients across the galaxy. Kim Sora looked up from the psychological evaluation she was conducting. "We're still healers," she said quietly. "But sometimes you have to cut out a cancer to save the patient. The galaxy is sick, and we're going to cure it the only way it understands." Deep in the void between galaxies, humanity's early warning stations went silent one by one. For 300 years, these hidden outposts had monitored alien communications, tracked fleet movements, and provided advance warning of threats to human colonies. The galaxy had grown comfortable with their presence, thinking of them as helpful communication relays and navigation aids. Now those same stations were powering down their public functions while activating systems that had remained hidden for centuries. The aliens who had relied on human-maintained communication networks suddenly found themselves cut off from vast portions of the galaxy. What they didn't realize was that humanity had been listening to everything they said for generations, building the most comprehensive intelligence network in galactic history. The silence that followed humanity's withdrawal was more than just the absence of voices. It was the sound of a galaxy finally realizing that the species they had dismissed as weak and emotional had been watching, learning, and preparing for this moment since the day they first ventured into space. The real war hadn't started yet, but the galaxy was already losing. War leader Vexthul stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Bone Render, watching the swirling lights of hyperspace fade away as his massive invasion fleet dropped back into normal space. 200 of the Zephyrian Empire's finest warships had come to finish what they started with the destruction of New Geneva. He expected to find Earth's pathetic defense fleet cowering behind their home planet, maybe a few outdated patrol boats, and some hastily converted cargo ships. Instead, he found himself staring at something that made his blood run cold. The entire Sol system had been transformed into a fortress that defied imagination. Every asteroid in the belt between Mars and Jupiter bristled with weapon emplacements that hummed with barely contained energy. The moons of Saturn and Jupiter had been hollowed out and converted into massive gun platforms, their surfaces covered with launch bays and targeting arrays. Even tiny Pluto at the edge of the system showed signs of heavy fortification. "Impossible," Vexthul whispered, his scarred face twisting with disbelief. "How could the Softskins build all this without us knowing?" His sensor operator, a young Zephyrian whose scales still showed the bright colors of youth, stammered as he read the incoming data. "War leader, I'm detecting energy signatures I don't recognize. These weapons are using technology that's not in our databases. Some of it looks like our own designs, but improved beyond our current capabilities." Vexthul snarled, showing rows of razor-sharp teeth. "Scan for their fleet. Where are their ships hiding?" The answer came a moment later, as space itself seemed to ripple and twist. Ships appeared from nowhere, materializing out of what had looked like empty void. Not the clumsy, boxy vessels that humanity had used for centuries, but sleek predators that moved with deadly grace. Their hulls were black as the space between stars, covered with weapons that glowed with the light of captured suns. Admiral Choi Jun sat in his command chair deep beneath the surface of Luna, Earth's ancient moon. Around him, holographic displays showed the Zephyrian fleet in perfect detail, every ship tracked and targeted by weapon systems that had been waiting for this moment for decades. The war room was completely silent, except for the soft hum of computers processing targeting data. He had dreamed of this moment for 30 years, ever since he was a young officer watching Zephyrian raiders destroy a human research station. Then he had been forced to retreat, to watch civilians die while he followed orders to avoid escalation. Those days were over. "All stations report ready, Admiral," said his tactical officer, Commander Park So-young. Her voice was steady, but Choi Jun could see the fire in her eyes. She had lost family to alien raiders, too. Choi Jun looked at the display showing 200 enemy warships spreading out in attack formation. Ships that had murdered 50,000 civilians without a second thought. Ships that had come to Earth, expecting an easy victory over a species they considered weak and inferior. "Fire," he said simply. What happened next would be talked about in hushed whispers throughout the galaxy for generations to come. The asteroid belt erupted with light as thousands of hidden weapons opened fire simultaneously. Beams of pure energy, more powerful than anything the galaxy had ever seen, reached out across millions of kilometers to touch the Zephyrian fleet with the fury of stars. The Zephyrian ships began dying immediately. Their shields, designed to stop the weapons they knew about, crumpled like paper against technology that incorporated the best of every alien civilization humanity had ever encountered. Particle beams that used Valkyrie energy-focusing techniques, plasma cannons improved with Thraken metallurgy, quantum torpedoes based on crystalline computational methods stolen from the Prime Speaker's own people. Captain Li Huan piloted his new ship, the Soul's Vengeance, through the battle with movements that seemed to defy physics. The vessel was nothing like the diplomatic transport he had commanded just weeks before. This was a weapon of war built from 3 centuries of stolen alien technology, incorporating stealth systems the Zephyrians had never imagined, and weapons that could punch through their heaviest armor like it was tissue paper. His sister, Ji Young, and her children were still dead, floating somewhere in the debris field that had been New Geneva. But every Zephyrian ship that died under his guns brought him one step closer to the justice they deserved. The battle lasted exactly 17 minutes. When it was over, the space around Earth was filled with the wreckage of 200 Zephyrian warships. Not a single human vessel had been damaged. Not one human life had been lost. The species that had dismissed humanity as too weak for warfare had just learned the price of underestimating their enemies. Dr. Kim Sora sat in the communications center of the hidden medical facility, uploading the battle footage to every human cell throughout the galaxy. The message was simple and clear. The healers had become hunters, and their surgical precision now served a very different purpose. The same hands that had saved alien lives for centuries were now taking them with terrifying efficiency. The footage spread through human networks like wildfire. Every human diplomat who had smiled and nodded, while aliens dismissed their species as inferior. Every human doctor who had healed alien patients, while those same species ignored human suffering. Every human peacekeeper who had prevented wars, while watching their own people die in alien raids. They all saw the same thing. Their time of weakness was over. On distant worlds throughout the galaxy, humans who had lived quiet lives as teachers, technicians, and traders suddenly revealed their true nature. Commander Imte's sleeper agents, placed decades ago in positions of trust within alien governments and military structures, activated their hidden protocols. The helpful human janitor in the Valkyrie Defense Ministry turned out to be a master saboteur. The quiet human nurse in the Thraken military hospital was actually a trained assassin. The friendly human communications technician on Nexus Prime had been copying classified documents for 30 years. The galaxy's communication networks, which had been largely built and maintained by helpful humans over the centuries, suddenly became weapons in humanity's war machine. Every private conversation between alien leaders that had been accidentally overheard by human technicians. Every military transmission that had passed through human-maintained relay stations. Every government secret that had been shared in the presence of human translators or advisors. All of it had been carefully catalogued and stored, waiting for this moment. Within hours of the Sol System battle, alien governments across the galaxy found their most sensitive information being broadcast on public channels. Military plans were exposed, corruption was revealed, and secret alliances were laid bare for all to see. The species that had trusted humans with their infrastructure discovered that their protected species had been the most effective intelligence network in galactic history. Admiral Choi Jun studied the tactical displays showing human strike forces moving into position throughout the galaxy. The destruction of the Zephyrian fleet had been just the opening move. The real war was about to begin, and humanity was no longer interested in playing by the galaxy's rules. The aliens had taught humanity that the strong prey on the weak, that compassion was weakness, and that only force mattered in the end. Now humanity was going to show them exactly what they had learned from those lessons. The galaxy had created monsters, and those monsters were coming home to teach their creators about the true meaning of fear. The age of human weakness was over. The age of human vengeance had begun. The morning sky over the Thraken homeworld had always been a peaceful shade of green, filtered through the thick canopy of their tree cities that stretched toward the clouds. But today, that sky burned orange with the light of their own weapons firing down from orbit. The massive defense platforms that had protected their world for 1,000 years had turned their guns on each other, controlled by invisible signals. That came from nowhere and everywhere at once. Commander Imte watched the chaos unfold from his hidden command center, his fingers dancing across control systems that had been secretly installed in alien infrastructure decades ago. Every helpful human technician who had ever worked on Thraken military systems had left behind a little gift. A backdoor here, a hidden subroutine there. Nothing obvious, nothing that would be detected by routine security scans. But when activated all at once, these tiny modifications gave humanity complete control over the Thraken's most sophisticated weapons. Target their military command centers, Imtai ordered his cyber warfare specialists. Avoid civilian areas, but make sure they understand the price of indifference. The Thraken had been among the loudest voices calling for measured responses to human genocide. When New Geneva burned, they had suggested a strongly worded letter. When human colonies were raided, they recommended economic sanctions that lasted exactly long enough to be forgotten. They had watched human children die with the same cold detachment they might show to numbers on a financial report. Now they were learning what it felt like to be helpless, while others decided their fate. Their own defense grid rained fire on their military installations, while their leaders screamed orders that no one could follow. The same technological systems they had trusted for centuries had become weapons in the hands of the species they had dismissed as technologically inferior. Far across the galaxy, Captain Li Huan stood on the bridge of his flagship as the human fleet approached Zephyrian Prime. The planet below was a fortress world, covered with military installations and weapons platforms that had been used to launch raids against defenseless human colonies for decades. This was where his sister's killers had returned to celebrate their victory, where they had planned the destruction of New Geneva. The Zephyrian fleet that rose to meet them moved with the practiced efficiency of a warrior race. Their ships were brutal and angular, designed to inspire fear rather than admiration. For centuries they had been the galaxy's apex predators, taking what they wanted through force and intimidation. They had never faced an enemy that had been studying them for 300 years. All ships execute pattern Omega-7, Li Huan commanded, his voice steady despite the fire burning in his chest. The human fleet moved like a school of fish, each ship knowing exactly where the others would be without needing constant communication. This was the coordination that came from centuries of hidden preparation, from war games played in secret, while the galaxy thought humanity was incapable of strategic thinking. Every human captain had been trained for this moment since childhood, raised on stories of alien cruelty and human patience. The Zephyrian defenders found themselves facing an enemy that anticipated their every move. Their standard battle formations had been analyzed and countered. Their most advanced weapons had been reverse-engineered and improved upon. Their tactical doctrines had been studied by human military academies that officially didn't exist. Within hours, the planet's orbital defenses were silent, and Zephyrian Prime lay defenseless beneath human guns. In the captured consortium capital on Nexus Prime, Dr. Kim Sora worked with grim determination in what had once been the galaxy's most prestigious diplomatic facility. The building had been converted into a war crimes tribunal, its elegant chambers now serving as courtrooms where alien leaders faced justice for their crimes against humanity. The irony was not lost on her. The same medical expertise she had used to heal alien patients was now being employed to keep war criminals alive long enough to stand trial. The Zephyrian commanders, who had ordered the destruction of human colonies, required constant medical attention to survive the stress of facing their victims' families. The consortium delegates, who had dismissed human suffering as acceptable losses, needed treatment for the psychological trauma of hearing their own recorded words played back in court. Keep the Thraken delegate stable, she instructed her medical team. He needs to be conscious when the families of the Kepler Station refugees give their testimony. Dr. Kim Sora had taken an oath to do no harm. and she was keeping that oath in the most twisted way possible. Every alien leader who had enabled human genocide would live to face justice. Their deaths would be legal, documented, and witnessed by the galaxy they had failed to protect. On the industrial world of Valkyrie Prime, the metallic species that had built the galaxy's most advanced computer systems discovered that their supposedly secure government archives had been completely compromised. Every secret file, every classified document, every private communication between their leaders had been copied and analyzed by human intelligence services for over 200 years. The evidence was overwhelming. Contracts to supply weapons to raiders who attacked human colonies. Votes to classify human settlements as non-essential territories that could be sacrificed for political convenience. Communications discussing the human problem and ways to limit their influence in galactic affairs. All of it carefully catalogued and preserved by the helpful human technicians who had maintained their computer systems. Commander Park Hyun-woo, who had spent 15 years posing as a simple communications engineer on Valkyrie Prime, finally dropped his cover as he transmitted the evidence to every news network in the galaxy. The species that prided itself on logical thinking and advanced technology had been completely outsmarted by the primitive humans they had dismissed. "Your leaders have been lying to you for centuries," his broadcast began. "While you trusted them to make decisions for your civilization, they were making deals with murderers and profiting from human suffering. This is the evidence of their crimes." Admiral Choi Jun coordinated the systematic dismantling of every military force that had enabled or ignored human suffering from his command center beneath Earth's surface. His strategy was elegant in its precision, targeting only those who had blood on their hands while leaving civilian populations untouched. This wasn't conquest in the traditional sense. This was education delivered at the point of a gun. The Rigel Defense Force, which had provided escorts for Zephyrian raiders, found their ships disabled by computer viruses that turned their own weapons against them. The Centauri Patrol, which had looked the other way when human transports disappeared, discovered that their navigation systems had been programmed to lead them into carefully prepared ambushes. The Vegan Commerce Guild, which had profited from selling human refugees into slavery, watched their trading stations burn while their pleas for help went unanswered. Each attack was surgical, precise, and completely devastating. The humans had learned their enemies' weaknesses by serving them, by healing them, by pretending to be their friends for centuries. Every species that had participated in human suffering discovered that their most trusted human allies had been documenting their crimes and preparing for this reckoning. The galaxy burned with the fires of human justice, but it was a controlled burn. Cities filled with innocent civilians remained untouched. Worlds that had protected human refugees found themselves under human protection. The species that had shown kindness to humanity during their time of weakness discovered that humans had very long memories for both cruelty and compassion. As the human war machine rolled across the galaxy with unstoppable momentum, the surviving alien leaders finally understood why Earth's children had been so effective as peacekeepers. They had studied war by preventing it, learning every detail of how conflicts started and how they could be ended. They had learned their enemies by healing them, gaining intimate knowledge of every species' biology and psychology. They had prepared for this reckoning by serving those who would become their targets, earning trust while gathering intelligence. The galaxy had taught humanity that strength was the only thing that mattered, that compassion was weakness, and that the strong had the right to prey on the weak. Now humanity was demonstrating exactly how well they had learned those lessons. The teachers had created the perfect students, and now it was time for final exams. The age of alien dominance was ending, not with humanity's conquest, but with their judgment, and that judgment was both swift and final. Admiral Choi Jun walked slowly through the wreckage of what had once been the galaxy's most prestigious diplomatic hall. The grand consortium chambers on Nexus Prime were barely recognizable now. Elegant crystal formations lay shattered on the floor, their musical chimes forever silenced. The towering pillars that had once supported the Dome of Unity were cracked and blackened by weapons fire. Alien delegates huddled in the corners, their eyes wide with the kind of fear that comes from finally understanding how badly you've misjudged your enemy. The war was over, but not in the way anyone had expected. Humanity hadn't conquered the galaxy or claimed alien worlds as prizes. They had simply demonstrated, with surgical precision, exactly what happened when you pushed the wrong species too far. Every government that had enabled human genocide was gone. Every military force that had ignored human suffering had been dismantled. Every leader who had dismissed human lives as acceptable losses was either dead or waiting for trial. Look around. You, Admiral Choi Jun said to the trembling representatives of a dozen different species. His voice echoed in the damaged chamber, calm and steady, despite the destruction surrounding them. This is what happens when you mistake patience for weakness, when you confuse compassion with inability. The surviving Thraken delegate, his bark-like skin scarred from the fires that had consumed his homeworld's military installations, spoke, in a voice barely above a whisper. "What do you want from us?" Admiral Choi Jun smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Nothing. Absolutely nothing. We return to our borders. Earth withdraws from galactic affairs until you prove worthy of our trust again." The declaration sent shockwaves through the assembled aliens. For 3 centuries, humanity had been the galaxy's mediators, healers, and peacekeepers. They had prevented countless wars, treated millions of patients, and maintained the delicate balance that kept civilization functioning. The thought of existing without them was terrifying, but the thought of trying to force them back was even worse. Captain Li Huan stood on the bridge of his flagship as the massive human fleet prepared to leave alien space forever. Around him, hundreds of ships that had brought terror to the galaxy's military forces now moved with the same quiet efficiency they had shown during the war. No victory celebrations, no triumphant speeches, no gloating over their defeated enemies. Just the professional competence of soldiers completing their final mission. "All ships, set course for the Sol system," he commanded. "It's time to go home." The withdrawal was as sudden and complete as humanity's appearance had been. Within hours, every human warship had vanished from alien space, leaving behind only the wreckage of the forces that had opposed them and the memories of what the galaxy's gentle species could accomplish when they stopped being gentle. Behind them, they left a galaxy forever changed. The Zephyrian Empire had been completely destroyed, its leaders executed for war crimes, and its remaining worlds placed under the protection of species that had opposed their raids. The consortium had collapsed entirely, its member species no longer trusting each other after humanity had revealed centuries of secret betrayals and hidden agendas. Border conflicts that had been prevented by human peacekeepers erupted into full-scale wars, as old grudges resurfaced without mediators to contain them. Dr. Kim Sora supervised the final evacuation of human personnel from alien worlds, her medical transport loading the last of the doctors, nurses and technicians who had served alien patients faithfully for generations. These weren't warriors or spies, just healers who had answered the galaxy's call for help whenever disease or disaster struck. But even they were leaving now, taking with them knowledge that could never be replaced. "It breaks my heart to abandon patients who still need us," whispered Dr. Yoon Mi-kyung, a surgeon who had spent 40 years treating injured civilians on a dozen different worlds. Dr. Kim Sora understood her colleague's pain, but she also understood the necessity of their withdrawal. "We can't heal a wound that refuses to stop bleeding," she replied. "Maybe when they learn to value life the way we do, we can return to help them again." As her transport lifted off from the alien world for the last time, Kim Sora looked down at the hospitals and medical centers that would soon fall silent without human staff. The galaxy would learn to treat its own injuries now, or it would suffer the consequences of losing the species that had kept it healthy for 3 centuries. Commander Imtai worked around the clock to establish the new perimeter around human space, a boundary that none dared cross now that they understood what humanity was truly capable of. The monitoring stations that had once served as early warning systems for alien threats were being converted into something far more ominous. These installations would watch, record, and analyze everything that happened in the galaxy beyond human borders. The defensive grid that protected human space incorporated technology stolen from every alien species over 3 centuries of patient observation. Cloaking devices based on Rigelian quantum mechanics, energy shields derived from Centauri plasma research, weapon systems that combined the best innovations of a dozen different civilizations. The species that had shared their knowledge with helpful human technicians had unknowingly armed their greatest enemy. But the most terrifying aspect of humanity's new defenses wasn't the technology itself. It was the intelligence network that supported it. Every human who had ever worked alongside aliens had been gathering information, mapping weaknesses, and preparing for this eventual confrontation. Diplomatic secrets, military capabilities, economic vulnerabilities, psychological profiles of entire species. All of it had been catalogued, analyzed, and stored in databases that would help humanity predict and counter any future threats. The final human message broadcast across all galactic networks was deceptively simple, delivered in the calm, measured tones that had once made alien leaders feel safe in humanity's presence. But now those same voices carried an undertone of barely contained menace that made even the bravest aliens shiver with fear. "We choose not to hunt," the message began, transmitted simultaneously on every frequency and in every alien language. "Do not mistake that choice for inability. We have shown you what we are capable of when our patience runs out. We will return to the galaxy when you learn to value life as we do. Until then, we watch, we remember, and we wait." The transmission ended with recordings from the war, images of Zephyrian fleets dying in minutes, footage of alien military installations, crumbling under the weight of their own weapons, audio recordings of war criminals begging for mercy they had never shown to human victims. The message was clear. Humanity could do this again whenever they chose, and next time they might not be so restrained. The galaxy entered an age of uneasy peace, but it was the peace of exhaustion rather than understanding. Species that had cooperated for centuries now viewed each other with suspicion, wondering what secrets their neighbors might be hiding. Governments that had seemed stable for generations collapsed as their crimes against humanity were exposed to their own populations. Military alliances crumbled as member species realized they could no longer trust their allies' true intentions. The most disturbing realization was that humanity's greatest strength had never been their compassion or their healing abilities. Those had been real, but they had also been tools used to hide something far more dangerous. Humanity's true power lay in their ability to conceal their nature while learning everything about their enemies. They had been the perfect predators, hiding among their prey for centuries while gathering the knowledge they would need to destroy them. The galaxy finally understood that the gentle species who had healed their sick and prevented their wars were the most dangerous predators of all. Not because they were stronger or more advanced than other species, but because they chose when to reveal their true nature. They had the patience to wait centuries for the right moment, the intelligence to learn from their enemies' mistakes, and the ruthlessness to act with devastating efficiency when their moment finally came. Now, humanity watched from beyond their borders, and the galaxy wondered what would happen if they ever decided to stop choosing peace. The answer to that question had already been written in the ashes of the Zephyrian Empire and the ruins of the Consortium chambers. The only question that remained was whether the galaxy would learn from those lessons before humanity's patience ran out again.